Hello and welcome into the India Cricket Show. I'm your host, Andrew McLean, here on Global Cricket Radio. And what a day we've seen at Newlands in Cape Town for the second test between India and South Africa. And of course, leading into this match, there was a few talking points. I mean, I guess the first one was that it was Dean Elgar's last test match for South Africa. From what I understand, he was asked to retire at the end of the series, before the series started. That was despite the fact that the SA20 domestic league was going to go on, and South Africa wouldn't be able to field anywhere near a proper side for a test series against New Zealand, which is coming up in February. And Shukri Conrad asked Dean Elgar to retire, and obviously he sort of agreed to that, probably reluctantly. And so this is Dean Elgar's last test match. He won't be going to New Zealand, and he won't be playing after this. But, it's a bit of a strange thing, bearing in mind he just scored 185 in the last match, the first test at Centurion. And you wonder why would you leave Dean Elgar out of a side which is basically made up of a bunch of club cricketers, one of which was playing minor league cricket in America and is suddenly in the test side to go to New Zealand. But that's another matter. From India's perspective, of course, they got a right old royal beating at Centurion. They collapsed horribly to lose by an innings and 35 runs. So they had a lot to prove today. And so the side that was selected today, that I suppose the main change was that Ravindra Jadeja came back into the side. He missed the first test the first test at Centurion. He missed the first test because of a back spasm, and he replaced Ravichandran Ashwin in this match. So it meant that India had a more balanced team, because, well, not because there's too much difference in the batting. Of course, Ashwin scored 5 or 6 first or test hundreds, so he's a great batsman. But sorry, just forget me. I've just lost my teeth there slightly. But his replacement, of course, Ravi Ravindra, he's an exceptional bowler. He can get through many overs. He doesn't give away any runs. He keeps the over rate in check. So he was selected into the side, and it was a good situation for South Africa in theory, because Dean Elgar, who's standing in as captain for Temba Bavuma, who injured himself in the last match, Dean Elgar won the toss. Probably threw the coin higher than I've ever seen anyone ever throw the coin ever before. Perhaps it was for the cameras to get the coin in front of Table Mountain or something like that. But the coin fell, and Rohit Sharma, the touring captain from India, he didn't call correctly, and South Africa won the toss and elected to bat. And I think Dean Elgar said at the time that there might be a few terrors on this pitch, but we would like to have first use of it. And Rohit Sharma also said that had they won the toss, that they would have done the same. So it was South Africa to have first use of the wicket, and it was a beautiful day in Cape Town at Newlands, which is one of the most beautiful cricket grounds in the world. I was actually there back in 2000, just after the millennium, to watch England play South Africa, and I can speak personally about how beautiful it is to watch a match in Cape Town. But what was also quite interesting about the South African side that they selected, of course, Temba Bavuma, who's the captain of the Test side, he injured his hamstring in the first match at Centurion, and what I thought was surprising was the fact that Tristan Stubbs made his Test debut today in the place of Bavuma. But what's very unusual about that is that the South African selectors literally a couple of days ago named their side to go to New Zealand, and as we know, the side to go to New Zealand excludes pretty much everyone that's playing in the SA20. So I thought it was a little bit strange that they gave a debut to Tristan Stubbs, who's not even part of that side, to go to New Zealand. So that was an interesting talking point. But anyway, the match got underway at Newlands, and South Africa had first use of the wicket in terms of batting, and it was pretty much a disaster. I mean, could you imagine starting a new year? You're 1-0 up in the series, and you want to win the series. You've never lost to South Africa. You've never lost to India and South Africa, and you're bowled out in 23.2 overs. It's scarcely believable. As I say, winning the toss, beautiful day in Cape Town. It wasn't to do with overhead conditions. Perhaps there was something in the wicket, I'm not entirely sure, but I did watch some of it, but I live in Bali, so I lost my TV feed at one point, but it was absolutely crazy. I mean, Mohammad Siraj, who didn't do too much in the first match, he went absolutely ballistic in this innings, and, I don't even need to call the fall of the wickets, but what I can tell you is that Mohammad Siraj bowled 9 overs, 3 maidens, and got 6 for 15. So I think that's probably on par with Stuart Broad against Australia back in 2013, or was it 15, when he got 8 for 15. And it's a very, very sorry-looking scorecard for South Africa. So just running through it, Aidan Markram was caught by Jaiswal, bowled Siraj for 2. Dean Elgar was LBW, Siraj for 4. Tony de Zorzi caught KL Rahul, bowled Siraj for 2. Tristan Stubbs on debut, batting number 4, caught Rohit Sharma, bowled Bumrah for 3. David Bedingham, of course, who made 50 in his previous match, and is one of the few players that are actually going to that is actually going to New Zealand in February. He was caught Jaiswal, bowled Siraj for 12. Kyle Verreynne caught Shubman Gill, bowled Siraj for 15. Marco Jansen, of course, who made that brilliant 80 odd in the previous match, which really set up South Africa's win. He was caught KL Rahul, bowled Siraj for 0. And then into the tail, Maharaj was caught Bumrah, bowled Mukesh Kumar for 3. Rabada was caught Shreyas Iyer off Kumar for 5. And Nandri Berger, of course, just in his second match, he was caught Jaiswal, bowled Bumrah for 4. The not-out batsman was Lungi Nidhi. So South Africa all out for 55. I mean, I don't think any of the fans at Newlands probably would have expected that. And so South Africa was actually batting very, very quickly after that. And, very, very surprising, of course, that they were... I'm just checking out the exact time of this. So... Yeah, so India was actually batting before lunch. They were 0 for 0 at lunch. I just had to remind myself. But so South Africa was all out in the first session, and forgive me, my statistical memory is not that great. But aside from the low scorecard, I know New Zealand had a horror at Newlands back in I think it was 2012 or 2011, and other sides have. So it's not unusual for a team to have a horror show. But anyway, so after lunch, India came out and didn't really start well for them either. But they got through to 153, but they only batted for 34 overs as well. So I don't know, like maybe this is one of those situations where at the end of the match, the ICC will say, well, that was just a minefield. You should never have played on that wicket. But I'd be very surprised if that happens. I mean, this is Cape Town, and I haven't been totally familiar with the weather there lately. But you should be able to produce a reasonably good wicket for a test match on the 3rd of January. It's not like it's in October or May. It's in the prime time for cricket at home in South Africa during the summer when the fans are there. But anyway, just looking at this this Indian scorecard. So Jaiswal was he failed again, unfortunately. The young man. I think that is his 4th Test match now, and he did well in the West Indies when he started, but KJ Rabada bowled him for a duck. Then there was quite a useful partnership actually. Rohit Sharma, he went after it early on. And perhaps as captain and by the fact that he didn't do very well in the last match, he really didn't contribute at all to that win in Centurion. He went after the bowling initially, but he eventually succumbed to Berger, Nanti Berger, who was caught by Jansen bowled Berger. So Rohit was out for 39 off 50 balls. So he scored quickly, and Shubman Gill, who's I think his place is under pressure in this side because Jaiswal's opening. Shubman Gill's been pushed down to number 3, but I was in Dominica when he had his first match at number 3, which was 4 tests ago, and he really hasn't done anything since. But he did make 36 today. So after Gill fell, it was 105 for 3, which brought Virat Kohli and Shreyas Iyer together. So at this point, India still had a reasonably good chance of posting a good total, but Shreyas Iyer perished again, caught Varane bowled Berger for a duck, which brought KL Rahul to the wicket. He perished as well, caught behind by Varane off Nagidi. And unfortunately, after that, it's a very, very, very looking scorecard. So while Virat Kohli was at the other end, and bearing in mind that Kohli had, essentially been the only person that made any runs in the second innings at Centurion when South Africa, when India was trying to make South Africa bat again, which they failed to do so. But this is one of the most astonishing things that I've ever seen in my whole life. So when KL Rahul got out, it was 153. So it was 153 for 5, right? So Virat Kohli's at the other end. I forget exactly what his score was at that time, but once KL Rahul nicked off, after that, and that was in the, let me just double check, that was in the 33rd over. 33.1 overs. In the 34.5 overs, so what's that? Three overs and 4 balls later, India was all out. So in other words, they lost their last 5 wickets for no runs. Jadeja was out for 0, Bumrah for 0, Mohammad Siraj for 0, Krishna for 0, and Mukesh Kumar was not out as Kohli was the last man dismissed. So what a day of ups and downs. I mean, it's astonishing that India had collapsed from, as I say, 153 for 5 to 153 all out, and it's just, it beggars belief how that's possible, particularly with the caliber of batsmen like Ravindra Jadeja, for example. I mean, the guy's a very, very good batsman. So India really blew an opportunity there to really ram home the advantage. So uh, on that, so South Africa was out for 55, as I mentioned, uh, and India finished up on 153, so they led by 91. Just looking at some of those bowling figures, it was kind of shared around. Rabada 3 for 38, Nagidi 3 for 30, and Berger 3 for 42, and there was one run out in there. So South Africa came out to bat again with Aiden Markram at the crease with Dean Elgar, and and Dean Elgar was at the crease with him, and they got through to 62 for 3. Elgar was dismissed for 12. He was caught Kohli bowled Mukesh Kumar for 12. Tony Dezorzi was promoted, or sorry, not promoted, but he batted at 3 again. Caught KL Rahul bowled Mukesh Kumar for 1. And Tristan Stubbs again on debut. And as I mentioned earlier, I still can't understand why he's even in the team, given that he's not going to New Zealand. He was he was dismissed for 1. Caught KL Rahul bowled Boomer. So the not out batsmen were Aiden Markram on 36, David Bettingham on 7. So South Africa's still trailing at the end of the first day, and it's been scarcely believable. And just on that note, we've got someone at the ground who's been watching it all day, and no doubt has been extremely busy trying to make any sense of this whatsoever. So on that note, I welcomed Anand Vasu to the show. Hi, Anand. Please just turn your camera off. But what a chaotic day of Test cricket. I mean, can you remember anything like that? I mean, you've been covering the match for like 20 or 30 years. I mean, that was just a bizarre day, right?
Well, I certainly haven't seen anything like this. And I've been doing this 25 years, and this is the 100th test match that I'm covering. And I absolutely have not seen a day's play like this. Forget about a first day's play. On any day, even on really tricky turning pitches where sometimes the game can move very quickly back in India, you don't see this kind of thing happening. Uh, South Africa obviously did not anticipate that the conditions would help fast bowlers so much. They won the toss and chose to bat first. They played one batsman short. I mean, if they wanted conditions that were so extreme, or indeed if they expected them to be this extreme, I don't think they would have done either of those things. But yes, it was like how India recently were bowled out for 36 in Adelaide. It was one of those perfect storms. It was not as though there was excessive sea movement. If anything, there was more movement on the first day of the first Test match at Centurion. It's just that the bowlers put the ball in exactly the right spots. Mohammad Siraj in that first spell, he seemed to just land the ball exactly where it would challenge top of off stump or the outside edge, and he did that relentlessly. The South Africa's batsmen played a few shots, some tentative, some perhaps a bit too aggressive, and nicked. And every time the edge was taken, it did not fall short. It did not go wide of the fielder. Went straight to someone, and every catch stuck. It was just one of those days.
Yeah, I mean,
Day began.
Anand, I I live in Bali, as you know, and you're obviously at Newlands, so you could see it firsthand. And at one point, I was watching on television, and then for some reason I lost my feed. But I think South Africa were 8 down when I lost my feed. But I was starting to think to myself, like, this has actually happened before at Newlands, right? Like, I remember New Zealand falling over massively cheaply back in about 2012. I'm pretty sure it's happened to Australia. In fact, I think it's even happened to India. I mean, what is it about the surface in Newlands? Because I watched the TV. It was a beautiful day. There didn't seem to be. There's no overhead conditions. There was no weather concerns. What is it about this venue that causes like unbelievable problems? And giving in mind that South Africa chose to bat first.
Well, you expect there to be some lateral movement on the first morning of the test match at Newlands. You expect there to be a little bit of swing, but what you typically don't get over here is the amount of bounce and carry that we saw. Because when you have bowlers who are swinging the ball one way, like bringing it into a batsman, and then it pitches and goes away from the bat, it becomes virtually unplayable because you have to commit to the shot. You need to play the shot. It's not like you can leave everything alone. But if you do try to play the shot, it, one of the edges is going to be defeated. We saw consistently that both the outside and inside edges were being challenged. Now, this either means that batsmen are playing very badly or that the ball is doing a lot more than they expected it to. And certainly, I don't think it was a case of atrocious batting or anything like that. It was not a pitch on which a team like South Africa should have been bowled out for 55. But we saw what happened when India came out to bat later as well. It's not as though the pitch eased out considerably, despite the top order putting together a fairly uh, robust reply. The last 6 wickets fell for 0 runs.
Yeah, I
So it just
and just on that, I mean that's another question. And as I mentioned, I didn't have TV at that time, and of course South Africa doesn't have radio anymore either. And I don't believe India has it either. But how does the side lose 5 wickets for no runs? What happened?
Well, this Indian tail is a famously long one. We know that from Jasprit Bumrah onwards, there isn't much batting ability, which is why the Indian team has preferred Shardul Thakur in recent times, using his batting to bolster the number 8 position. But India decided that it had enough chances and he was going for too much with the ball, which made them play one slow bowler in Ravindra Jadeja and then 4 fast bowlers. Now, none of these fast bowlers really bat. This we know. But what
But
also
to go
happened,
out for no runs though is like astonishing, right?
it's incredible. The thing is, it's not, it's, I think the batsmen after that 55 all out in the first innings weren't quite sure whether they should be aggressive or whether they should be defensive. And when you're a tail ender and you don't have the technique to counter late movement or late extra bounce, if you are indecisive, when the conditions are creating opportunities, it's only a matter of time before you get yourself out.
Yeah. So, Anand, I've got a question for you, right? As you say, you've been covering 100 tests now, and you're from India, and as you well know, is that my home country, New Zealand, was in Bangladesh recently, an incredibly low-scoring series, Mirpur in particular, and from memory, I think that the pitch got demerit points. Will this pitch get demerit points?
Um, this is a tricky one because if you look at the wickets that fell during the day, it was not extreme movement in any single delivery that caused a batsman to get out. It was not as though the ball was shooting low at one point and then suddenly rearing up from a good length. It was just that there was enough natural variation to keep the batsman in two minds. It's a kind of pitch where you never quite feel well set. We saw Rohit Sharma trying to push back against the South African bowlers, and he did so for a time, getting to 39. And Kohli made 46, looking quite assured till he kind of was on the verge of running out of batting partners and then played at one that he might have normally left alone and got out. So it was. I certainly think questions will be asked about this pitch because if this was India, it was a turning track, and India played 4 spinners and left out fast bowlers altogether, and 23 wickets fell, there would be a a lot of noise about that. Now, South Africa has done the reverse. In conditions that suit fast bowlers, they didn't bowl the spinner. They didn't need to. So
Yeah,
it's India
this
didn't need the spinner either.
yeah, I mean, they brought in Ravindra Jadeja, was a direct replacement for Ravichandran Ashwin, and you can understand why they did that because Ashwin was just a disaster in the last match. I mean, the way he threw his wicket away in the second innings at Centurion was unforgivable in my opinion. But the game situation as it stands, South Africa trail by. It's kind of unbelievable to even be saying this. At the end of day one, South Africa trail by 36 runs, and they have 7 wickets left. So, I mean, the chances of this match going to even to day three, um, despite, for whatever it might mean for South African cricket, having potentially 3 days of no cricket. Um, but what do you think might happen tomorrow, actually, based on what you saw today?
I would be shocked if we came back for a third day's play. Let me be honest. The locals here will tell you that Newlands usually quickens up on the second day because the sun's been beating down. It's been hot. It was a clear day with barely a cloud in sight, which means the pitch would just get a little harder than it was when the game began. Harder in the sense, not more difficult, but just more firm. So 36 runs might sound like very little, but in the context of the conditions here and the way these two teams have batted in this test match, India's first aim will be to see how many wickets they can get before that deficit is wiped out. And if they can pick up early wickets, which you would think is very likely given the morning session is when the condition aid the fast bowlers the most, then this game could be over very, very early on the second day.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you might have a situation of a really amazing stand between Markram and Bedingham, for example. And then you've got Kyle Varane after that, and Marco Janssen, who obviously scored runs in Centurion. But you know that remains to be seen. But Anand, I wanted to ask you about something else. Um, as you know, I'm from New Zealand, and it's a little bit of a sore point for us New Zealanders that South Africa has, by virtue of a bunch of circumstances, but essentially of their own making, has named a squad or did name a squad on New Year's Eve, or no, 30th day before New Year's Eve. They named a squad, a test squad, to go to New Zealand to play a test series. And as I alluded to in the introduction to the show, I found it very surprising that the replacement for Temba Bavuma for this match was Tristan Stubbs, who's essentially a one-day player who's not in the squad to go to New Zealand. So you're over there. You're speaking to people. You're around the press box. But what is the feeling in South Africa about the side that has been selected by Shukri Conrad and whoever else made the decision to go to New Zealand, and just everything surrounding all of this issue?
Well, obviously, this has taken up a lot of mind space over here leading into this test match. It pretty much dominated Dean Elgar's press conference, even despite this being his final test match. Uh, well, there's a large section of cricket-loving public who think that South Africa have done a disservice to Test cricket by prioritizing T20, their domestic SA20 competition, over a Test series that's part of the World Test Championship. You can understand why people feel that way, but if you look at the situation cricket South Africa are in, they really have little choice in the matter. They financially have been in the red for the last 3 years. SA20 is pretty much the last roll of the dice for them. And pulling their best players out of their own domestic league would just have been impossible. The tournament just wouldn't have happened. And if that tournament doesn't happen, then financially, Cricket South Africa crumbles. So it's far, far, far from an ideal situation. But I have to say that it was an inevitable one.
But don't you think though that the outside investors, which are basically put a proposal to Cricket South Africa, and as you know they are 6 IPL teams essentially. The outside investors have said, well, look, we can come and save you. Don't you think that they shouldn't have said, well, look, all the players need to be available for every single game. So if you take someone like Temba Bavuma, for example, who's at the Sunrisers Eastern Cape, I think his side is, he's probably never going to play a game anyway. Don't you think that the owners or the investors that are, the ones that signed off on the contract and the ones that are trying to keep South African cricket afloat, don't you think that or do you think that they should have said, well, let's see how it goes. Let's see where we finish up on the 10th of February and the weeks leading up to it, and let's work together so that you can actually put out a decent test side based on which teams get to the later stages of the SA20, which guys are not playing. Don't you think there was a much better solution than this?
Well, I think in an idealistic world, in a utopian world, something like that might have happened. But the private owners of these teams really have no interest or no stake in South African cricket. They're looking after what they believe are their assets, players that they have bought to represent their teams. And you're right, some of them may not even play all the games, but they're still valuable to the teams from marketing and other perspectives, which is why they paid money for them. So if anyone could make that decision, if anyone could look at it from that perspective, it was Cricket South Africa. But clearly they can't because they need the money.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and it was a very, very sad story the other day about Tony DeZorzi, for example, who was probably never in line for a SA20 contract, but he got picked up by Durban at the last minute, which meant he couldn't go to New Zealand with a test side, and he just made his test debut the week before in Centurion, and it's a very, very sad state of affairs. But I firmly believe that the way cricket's going, and I'll give you an example. Right, it's like last year Trent Boult was playing in the ICT20. Is that the name of the league in the UAE? And New Zealand cricket and New Zealand cricket fans were saying, no, 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 there's no way he should be playing in a test match. He's got no time to get there, and I'm kind of like, well, what if his team misses out on the finals? Then he's got a few weeks, and by the way, the test match, or so not a few weeks, a few days or a week or whatever. And by the way, they're actually playing the test match in Mount Maunganui, which is he's like 5 minutes down the road. So my view is that if you're going to have situations where you've got clashes, administrators should be, and selectors as well, should just say, okay, well, we can't select a team, 6 weeks ahead of time. We're going to have to select it much, much later. So I don't really understand why the South African selectors decided to pick their side now. It seems illogical to me.
Well, whether they pick the side now or later, none of these contracted players in the SA20 are going to be available for national selection. And if you push these players, you know what happens. We've seen it in West Indies. We've seen it in some other places. The players just turn down national contracts and play full time in leagues around the world.
Yeah, but Anand, that's a very weak argument because someone like Tony de Zorzi's on 175,000 rand. He could make 250,000 rand playing for South Africa.
Hello?
No, I was just saying that that's not really the case with South African cricketers, because someone like Tony de Zorzi, his price probably, because he got picked up at the last minute. He's on 175,000 rand, but the price for all the guys that are going to New Zealand, they get 250,000 rand. So it's not really about the money. That argument doesn't stack up.
My understanding, and I spoke to someone about this earlier today, is that if a South African player put himself into the SA20 auction and he got selected, then he didn't have an option, irrespective of what his price was. And in Tony de Zorzi's case, he came in as a replacement for Sean Abbott, I believe, and that
Yes.
was the price that Abbott was picked at. So I don't think de Zorzi contractually had a choice. This is what I'm given to understand by locals here.
Okay, well, that's not an area of expertise for either you or me. But anyway, great to chat with you. I'm just thinking it's probably about, wow, what is it now? Probably 20 years since I spoke to you last on when I was in New Zealand on Radio Sports. So very, very happy you joined me today on Global Cricket Radio to cover this match. And we we talked off air about what we're going to do over 5 days, but it looks like we're going to be doing it over 2 days.
Well, I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about tomorrow, and even if the game is done, there will be opportunities for us to discuss other things in cricket, other things around this game, even. So it'll be good to catch up with you sooner rather than later. Let's not wait 20 years for the next time.
All right. So from myself and Anand, that is the end of the India Cricket Show here on Global Cricket Radio.